Over 100 men were imprisoned here, but today, a woman was brought in. Everyone got excited, but their excitement quickly turned to confusion when they noticed she was holding a note. When they opened it, the message read, "She's the last one." That meant no one else would ever come through the passage again. You see, all these people had been locked inside a massive moving maze. They were trapped in its very center. Every morning, right on time, the entrance to the maze would open, and the group would take that chance to search for a way out. But even after running through it for 3 full years, they had never found an exit. By sunset, the entrance would shut automatically, and strange howling sounds could be heard from the maze's outer edges. To maintain some sense of order and survival, the fastest runners were chosen to form a special team called the Runners. Each day, the runners would venture into the maze, trying to find an escape route. The rest stayed back at the center, building a base and growing crops to survive. This was how they lived, primitive, but organized. But life inside the maze wasn't without danger. Unexpected events could be fatal. Every month, the mysterious passage would send up one new person and a limited supply of resources. Everyone who arrived had one thing in common: their memories had been wiped clean. Just a few days ago, our protagonist, Thomas, was dropped into this place while unconscious. When he woke up, the strange smiles of the people around him immediately put him on edge. He panicked and tried to run, but he didn't get far before tripping and falling. When he lifted his head, he saw the towering walls surrounding him on all sides. The sheer scale of it left him frozen in awe. He, too, had no memory. The leader here, Albie, introduced himself and explained the situation. Albie was the first person to ever arrive and had been living in the maze for 3 years. Thomas was curious about a large wall with a visible entrance, but when he asked about it, Albie simply warned him never to go and offering no further explanation. Not long after, Thomas saw 2 people sprinting out of the narrow gap. As he wondered what was going on, a boy nearby told him those were the runners. Only they were allowed inside. Seeing people go in and out stirred Thomas's curiosity even more. He approached the entrance for a better look, but before he got too close, a guy named Glade shoved him to the ground. Thomas was furious. He demanded to know why he wasn't allowed in and what was really inside. Before anyone could answer, a loud noise erupted behind them. Thomas turned to see the maze entrance slowly sealing shut as the whole structure began to shift. Time flew, and night soon fell. Once again, thunderous sounds echoed from within the maze. The second-in-command explained that the maze was changing again, and no one had ever survived a night inside. That's because after dark, deadly creatures roamed the maze. Anyone who had seen one never made it back. So, the runners could only enter during the day. The next morning, Albie took Thomas to the wall and told him to carve his name into it. Thomas noticed that several names had been scratched out, clearly marking those who had died. Later, while gathering wood in the forest, something strange happened. Out of nowhere, a man lunged at Thomas like a wild animal. He was one of the runners who had previously gone into the maze. Grabbing Thomas by the neck, he shouted, "This is all your fault." Thomas didn't have time to think. He struggled free and bolted out of the woods. Others quickly arrived and restrained the crazed runner. When they lifted his shirt, a terrifying wound was revealed. He had been injured by one of the monsters and now, infected by a virus that made him lose control. There was no cure. He'd soon go completely mad. With no other choice, they decided to exile him into the maze, leaving his fate to whatever lurked inside. Even though he begged for mercy, no one could help him. He had to go. As the gate prepared to close for the night, the group used sticks to force him in. It was a painful scene to watch. Eventually, he was driven in, the door shut, and his name was scratched off. The next day, with one runner gone, Albie decided to go into the maze himself. But when the gate was about to close that evening, they still hadn't returned. Everyone gathered at the entrance, worried they should have been back long ago. Suddenly, the maze trembled with noise. The gate was closing. Right then, the runner Miho appeared with Albie, but Albie had passed out. Miho refused to abandon his leader and struggled to drag him back. But no one from the base dared to go in and help. They only shouted for him to hurry. It was obvious they wouldn't make it before the door shut. Then Thomas did the unthinkable. He ran into the maze to help them. Though he got in safely, the gate slammed shut behind him. Miho was stunned. He had never seen anyone do something so reckless. He quickly realized Thomas was new and had no idea how dangerous things were. But night was falling fast, and Miho wasn't going to just stand around waiting to die. He decided to look for a place to hide. Thomas, on the other hand, wanted to make sure Albie was hidden first. That's when he noticed vines growing along the wall. Using them, they hoisted Albie up high, hoping to keep him safe for the night. But then Miho noticed the walls nearby had started moving. A monster emerged. and it saw them. Years of fear gripped Miho. He ran instinctively, leaving Thomas behind. Confused and frozen, the beast crept closer. Thomas quietly slipped into the thick vines, holding his breath. Once the monster passed, he secured Albie's vines quickly, but a second later, the creature returned. Thomas fled. It was his first time in the maze, and he had no clue where to go. He was completely lost. Then suddenly, something wet dripped onto his shoulder. He looked up and the monster was right behind him. Panic set in as he ran for his life. No matter how hard he pushed himself, he couldn't lose it. The chase led him higher and higher, until he was cornered. With no other option, Thomas leapt and grabbed onto a vine. The beast lunged after him, but during the fall, the creature got tangled in the vines, temporarily immobilized. Thomas finally caught his breath. Just then, Miho returned. He'd calmed down and come back to help. Together, they made a break for it. But soon, Thomas stopped. He noticed one of the walls nearby was starting to close again. A wild idea formed in his mind. With the monster chasing close behind, he shouted to draw its attention. Then he led it straight into the narrowing passage. In the end, Thomas used his wits to crush the monster between the closing walls. The next morning, when the maze doors opened again, everyone was stunned to see Thomas and the others walk out alive. No one had ever survived a night in the maze, so when word spread that Thomas had actually killed one of the monsters, everyone gathered for an emergency discussion. Glade, the group's strict rule follower, believed Thomas had acted recklessly. He didn't just break the rules, he killed a creature they'd long coexisted with. Who knew what kind of consequences that might bring? Glade insisted Thomas be punished, but the majority quickly spoke up in protest. Miho, especially, supported Thomas. In all their 3 years trapped inside, no one had ever defeated one of those creatures. Thomas had done the impossible. He believed they needed people like him, people who could help them escape. Just as tensions were rising, a strange sound came from the tunnel outside. Everyone ran to check it out, only to find another person being delivered, a girl. But Thomas had only arrived a few days ago. The monthly schedule had just been broken. Something was clearly wrong, and sure enough, in the girl's hand was a note. It read, "This is the last one," which meant no more people, no more supplies. They were officially cut off. Suddenly, the girl stirred. She gasped, shouted Thomas's name, then collapsed again. All eyes turned to Thomas, but right now, everyone was more concerned about survival. With no more supplies coming, how would they even feed themselves? That's when Thomas realized he couldn't just sit around waiting for answers. He had to go back into the maze. He needed to find something, anything that could help. Miho, inspired by Thomas's determination, gathered a few runners and followed him in. Soon, they returned to the site where the creature had died and managed to drag its body out from the wall. Inside its stomach, they found a strange device. It was still functioning. A glowing number 7 flashed on the screen. It was a major discovery. Later that night, Miho took Thomas deep into the forest, to a hidden cabin. Inside, he pulled back a cloth on a table, revealing an incredibly detailed model of the maze. It was a complete map, built from years of running and exploration. But Miho confessed something shocking. After all that effort, they had never found a way out. The truth had been kept secret to avoid mass panic. Miho then explained how the maze worked. There were 8 sections, and every night, the walls shifted. That's why they could never escape. Everything changed constantly. Just then, 2 teammates burst in with big news. The girl had woken up. Thomas rushed to see her, and from her, he got a crucial clue. She told him that 2 vials had been sent up with her. She didn't know exactly what they were for, but they were definitely important. Thomas had a sudden realization they might be antidotes. He quickly brought this idea to the second-in-command. Looking at Albie, who was still suffering from the infection, they had no other option. They injected him with the serum. The next morning, as the gates opened once again, Thomas and Miho set off with renewed hope. They had to find a way out. Their search brought them to Section 7, the origin point of the dead creature. Then the device from the monster's body began beeping faster. Thomas pulled it out. As they walked in a certain direction, the beeping sped up. It was guiding them. Following the signal, they reached a hidden passageway. Miho was stunned. This part of the maze had never been opened before. Cautiously, they stepped forward. Suddenly, the number on the device turned from red to green. With a loud thud, a wall behind them slowly opened. A cave appeared. Inside was thick, sticky slime, clearly the monster's nest. Before they could examine it further, a laser suddenly scanned the room. An alarm blared. They were in danger. Without hesitation, they ran for their lives. Behind them, the walls of the maze were beginning to shift again. Led by Miho, They sprinted back toward the base with everything they had. Thanks to their quick thinking, they made it back before sunset. That evening, they told everyone about the changes inside the maze. But Glade wasn't having it. He insisted Thomas was out of control, and that his reckless actions could doom them all. Glade argued that their current way of life trapped but alive was better than taking unknown risks. While they were still arguing, the girl delivered some shocking news. Albie was awake. Everyone rushed to his room. The infection had vanished, and more incredibly his memories had returned. But he looked devastated. Thomas tried to reassure him, saying they were close to finding the exit, but Albie just shook his head. "They'll never let us leave," he said grimly. He stared at Thomas, as if blaming him for everything. Just then, chaos erupted outside. They ran to the entrance only to discover the maze hadn't closed, which meant, for the first time ever, monsters could enter at night. As everyone froze in fear, things got worse. A massive bang echoed from the distance. Then, shockingly, new entrances began opening along 3 of the surrounding walls, passages no one had ever seen before. Panic set in. From every direction, monsters came charging into the camp. Screams filled the air. Friends were dragged away and slaughtered. The group retreated to the huts, but the flimsy shelters offered no safety. A monster grabbed one of their own with its tail and tried to drag him off. Luckily, the others held on tight. Albie jumped in with a weapon and attacked, forcing the creature to let go. But just as things calmed, another monster pounced, and this time, it got Albie. Thomas tried to help, but it was too late. As he lay dying, Albie told Thomas to lead the others. The loss hit Thomas hard. As he ran out to help more, he realized most of the monsters were suddenly leaving. Then, out of nowhere, Glade approached him angry and full of blame. Without a word, he punched Thomas in the face. To Glade, everything that had happened was Thomas's fault. Thomas looked around at the destroyed base. Guilt weighed heavy, but then he remembered what Albie said after regaining his memory. Doubt crept in. He had to know the truth, and he had a plan. Since the antidote restored Albie's memory, Thomas found a piece of the dead creature and stabbed himself with it. When he woke up, his past came rushing back. He and the girl had once worked behind the scenes. They helped run the maze, but after learning the horrors of the experiment, they tried to stop it and were thrown into the maze as punishment. Now, Thomas knew what had to be done. He had to lead the survivors out. But by now, Glade had taken control. As the new leader, he ordered the others to tie Thomas and the girl up at the maze entrance. He believed offering them as a sacrifice would calm the monsters down. But Thomas wasn't going down that easy. He broke free and fought back. Miho, unable to stand by any longer, rallied those who still supported Thomas and overpowered Glade. Thomas begged the others to join him in escaping, but most were too scared. They stayed behind with Glade. Only a small group followed Thomas. They returned to Section 7, but now, a new monster was guarding the cave entrance. There was no turning back. They had to fight. After a fierce battle, they pushed the creature into the abyss, but more monsters began pouring in from behind. They fought their way to the cave, retreating as they battled. Inside, Thomas and Miho discovered a strange doorway. After some fumbling, they managed to open it. Sadly, not everyone made it. Some were lost in the fight, but when the door activated, a trap system triggered, crushing many of the pursuing monsters. The survivors rushed through. The cave was dark and eerie. They carefully navigated the narrow halls until they finally reached a door. When they opened it, they found the bodies of the maze's operators, all of them dead, killed in what looked like a brutal attack. Suddenly, a screen lit up. A woman, who called herself a doctor, appeared. She explained everything. The world outside had collapsed. A terrifying virus had infected humanity, turning people into violent, mindless husks. But some babies were born immune. To study them, those children were taken and put through extreme tests. The maze was the final trial. Those who survived were the key to a cure, but not everyone agreed. A military faction attacked the lab, trying to rescue the kids. Feeling misunderstood and desperate, the doctor took drastic measures and ended her own life. After hearing this, the group was left in shock. The outside world sounded even worse than the maze, but they had no choice now. Moving forward was their only hope. They stepped out of the maze. Soon after, they were found by soldiers. They were saved and lifted onto a waiting aircraft. For the first time, they saw the full scale of the maze that had imprisoned them for 3 long years. But were they truly safe? In the final scene, the supposedly dead doctor came back to life. She wiped fake blood from her forehead and calmly declared, "Phase 1 complete." Everything had been a setup. The entire rescue, the chaos, the deaths, it was all part of the experiment. And now, the surviving teens were being taken to a ruined city. Unbeknownst to them, a far darker trial was about to begin. I'm a movie enthusiast. Please subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.